South Korea is grappling with the spread of lumpy skin disease, now confirming the total number of farms with infections at 69. How serious is a viral disease that affects cattle? We turn to Professor Michael Ward this morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Professor Ward, for our viewers who may not be so familiar with this particular disease, lumpy skin disease, please do walk us through what it is and why it's so detrimental for cattle.
Okay, so lumpy skin disease is caused by a virus. It's a pox virus. So there's a lot of pox viruses in nature. There's smallpox, chickenpox, monkeypox. This particular pox virus just affects cattle and buffalo. And as you can see there in that picture, it causes these lesions on the skin, these nodules that then can turn into sort of sores. It causes fever. Importantly, it stops cattle from eating. So they stop eating and they lose production. So they might stop milk production, they lose weight. So it's a very important economic disease. When it occurs, it affects a lot of cattle, but very few die. So it doesn't really cause a lot of mortality. Traditionally, it's been transmitted by blood-sucking or biting insects, so like mosquitoes and flies. But more recently, we've seen it being transmitted by close contact between cattle.
Sure, so it's a type of a pox that is targeting cattle. Now, this is the first time such a disease has been confirmed here in the country. Where did it come from? As far as I know, it's originated in Africa, but this is the first time we're seeing this here in the country.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the spread of this disease. As you said, it's essentially an African disease. During the last century, it was really confined to Africa. Then we saw some incursions. We saw the disease moving. We saw incursions into Europe, into Eastern Europe, the Balkans, Russia. In 2018, there were major outbreaks in South Asia, so particularly in India, Bangladesh, Nepal. And then in 2019 to 2020, we saw it spreading throughout Southeast Asia. So it's one of these diseases, these transboundary diseases, that has, for some reason, been moving very quickly in the last few years. We're not exactly sure why. It's probably got something to do with trade and the movement of cattle.
Sure. Now, what South Korea's agriculture ministry is saying that there is a high risk of the disease spreading further if selective culling is carried out without inoculation. Professor Ward, is that so? What's the best way to tame the spread then?
Yeah, it's a difficult disease to control. And like all these sort of diseases, it's very important to remove the infectious components. So these are animals that are actively infected. So the idea is to remove those by culling, limited culling in this case. But the main control response is vaccination. So there are vaccines, and as I understand, the South Korean government is trying very hard to very quickly vaccinate all cattle. So that will effectively stop the outbreak, but it does take weeks for that to have an effect. And you need to get that vaccine out fairly quickly. So that's a big logistical problem, trying to vaccinate all animals very quickly. But that's the principal response, is vaccination at this stage.
Right, that's the ultimate solution, because I do know that it takes at least 3 weeks to make that vaccine effective. And South Korea is trying to finish the vaccination program by November 10th. Now, some animal protection organizations here in South Korea are arguing that those cattle infected with the disease should be quarantined and treated rather than culled. Now, is that really a better idea? What do you think?
Certainly quarantine will help a lot, and there needs to be strict quarantine. But the problem with this disease is you have vectors, so insect vectors involved, so mosquitoes and biting flies. Even with quarantine, that disease spread pathway is very difficult to control. So that's why that probably isn't as effective as some other diseases. So very much the very rapid vaccination, removing actively infected herds, and then general biosecurity. So keeping restrictions on who enters, who exits these infected areas. That's very important.
Right. South Korean authorities are really paying close attention to this particular disease because, like I mentioned, it is the first time we are seeing this disease spreading throughout the nation. Then Lastly, is there any way we can prevent the emergence of such a disease like LSD in the first place, though?
Yeah, it's very difficult, particularly with the involvement of insects. So, how do you stop the movement of insects? You can certainly control the movement of animals, so your borders and the importation of animals. Also, various products or materials that can be contaminated by this pox virus. So very strict sort of quarantine is the way to control the movement of this disease, and that's being attempted throughout Asia, really, where we've seen this disease just explode. It spread very quickly, very rapidly. So really biosecurity, border protection, and also surveillance, so that when you see the disease, you can control it very quickly. So that would be the key elements, trying to stop the spread of this disease throughout Asia, and particularly in South Korea.
Definitely, and with the vaccination, hopefully it will tame the spread here in South Korea before it gets spread any further. All right, Professor Ward, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.